What's up, everybody? Teague from Battle City Games back here with another deck profile, post-Alliance Insight. Today we're going to be taking a look at my updated Blue Eyes White Dragon deck profile. I did recently get 6th place at the Pittsburgh Regional with this deck prior to the Alliance Insight release, so I'm very happy to bring an updated version to y'all post-Alliance Insight with the brand new Ancient Fairy Life Dragon, which adds a lot more than you may think to the deck. So let's go ahead and get into it. Of course, it can't be a Blue Eyes deck profile without Blue Eyes White Dragon. Only 2 copies. I do think this is pretty standard for the deck. I prefer the original art because it has the nostalgia factor. Also, triple Sage with Eyes of Blue. Again, this is going to be pretty standard for your Blue Eyes deck profiles, just being the best start of it you can probably draw for the deck, getting you to your Maiden, searching a Veiler if need be, just an all-around powerful card. And remember that its on summon effect is not once per turn, so if you do have multiple and you have your additional summons through Mausoleum, you can summon and use the effect multiple times. Next, we are still on Triple Maiden of White again. This card not only getting you to your True Light, but also being able to summon itself back from grave repeatedly. Just helps you get into your Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon plays. And then additionally, the effect to summon a level 1 Light Tuner or Blue Eyes from grave when she's targeted does help you extend some of your combos and help you set up more resilient boards. And then for the last Blue Eyes monster, or Blue Eyes related monster, I do play 1 Neo-Kaiser Seahorse. So being that this is the Primite build of the deck, you're not going to see more of these in the deck. But this is a card that I think a lot of people overlook. It's a level 4 dragon, so it can get you into your Link 1 Spirit with Eyes of Blue. And then when it's sent to the graveyard from the field, it lets you send a level 1 Light Tuner from your deck to the graveyard, so you can use it to send your Maiden. Which means that in certain situations this is better than your Ether Barrel Dragon, because if you don't open a level 1 Light Tuner, but you open this, it still gets you into a combo that ends on your Spirit Dragon. And it can also special summon itself if you have Blue Eyes on the field. That doesn't come up too often, but it can come up. But primarily we're using it because it can get us into the Link 1 and also get our Maiden into graveyard, so we can get into our Spirit Dragon, get access to our True Light, etc. Speaking of Ether Barrel, we are on 2 copies. The 3rd copy of this got cut for the Neo-Kaiser Seahorse. This is a card that, as powerful as it is, once you have 1 in rotation, it does get a little bit redundant. And so I made that decision to cut the 3rd copy to give me more versatility in the form of the Neo-Kaiser Seahorse. But just an extremely powerful card, getting your Primate engine going, and then also getting you into Blue Eyes by linking it off into Spirit with Eyes of Blue. Then continuing with the Primate engine and moving into the spells, we are on Triple Lordly Load. I know this card is still a little bit pricey right now. It does have a reprint coming up in the new Battles of Legends set in June, so hopefully that will reduce the price a little bit. But I believe this is the best way to play the deck, and I don't want to bring y'all a deck profile that I don't think is going to be the most competitive. If you would like to see some alternatives, maybe some cheaper versions of this deck and another deck profile, let me know down in the comments, and I'm happy to do that. But I wanted to start off with what I think is going to be the best version of the deck for y'all. So Triple Lordly Load gets us to our Ether Barrel, gets us to a Drill Beam, and then just having that turn over turn ability to get out a Blue Eyes can help you in the grind game quite a bit. And then for the last card in our Primate package, we do have the 1 Drill Beam. Being that it's recurable, essentially every turn means you don't need to play multiple copies, because once you have 1, you have it in rotation. And I have seen some people argue for 2 copies, but if you're playing 2 copies in the hopes of opening it and being able to use it on your first turn, that also means you would have to hard draw another Primate card, hard draw a Blue Eyes, which you don't want to do, or not have it live until you have that Blue Eyes on board. So I think 1 copy is fine. Again, it's very searchable, and it recurs itself every turn. Then for the Blue Eyes spells, Of course, Triple Wishes for Eyes of Blue, just a great card, not only getting you a level 1 tuner, but also getting you a Speller Trap that mentions Blue Eyes, and then the ability to banish itself from graveyard to equip a fusion or a Blue Eyes monster from your extra deck to your Blue Eyes. Helps you get into your Tyrant Dragon plays. Just be careful when you activate this card. It is great Ash Blossom bait, so unless I have to, I typically try to save this card for later into my combo, so that maybe my opponent will use an Ash Blossom on a Sage, or on a Spirit with Eyes of Blue effect, or a Mausoleum effect to send to Blue Eyes, thinking that I don't have the wishes because I would have led with it, and then you can resolve your wishes once you know Ash Blossom is out of the way. So just a little tip for y'all there. And then for the other Blue Eyes cards, we have the Mausoleum of White, and we have the Roar of the Blue-Eyed Dragons. Mausoleum, of course, searchable by our Spirit with Eyes of Blue, and Roar is a great option for extending your plays, and then also especially against a deck like Malice, if they choose to banish a Blue Eyes with a Bestial or with White Binder, being able to use Roar to get that Blue Eyes back into rotation can be very powerful. A lot of opponents don't even realize that this summons from banished, and so when they get rid of your Blue Eyes, they think, okay, great, now I only have to deal with one, or maybe they banish both at the same time. They think, all right, now it's out of rotation, and then you can just use Roar to bring it back into rotation. So I try to save this card for as late as possible if I am playing against something that I know has Bestials or has the ability to banish my Blue Eyes from graveyard. And then for the other spells in the deck, the last two are going to be one Called by the Grave, one Crossout Designator. Again, we always want to stop Ash Blossom, Droll and Lockbird if we can. We want to be able to play through those hand traps for some of our weaker hands, so that's why I choose to play both of these. Moving into the traps, for the Blue Eyes traps, we have the one Majesty of White Dragons and one True Light. Of course, True Light always recurable from the graveyard thanks to Maiden of White, and then Majesty of White Dragons. Being non-targeting destruction for up to 2 is very powerful. It can be very hard for your opponent to play around this effect. So I think it's a great card. Again, another small tip. I know a lot of people like to side out traps going second. I've found through a lot of games that every time I sided this card out, I regretted it because you play so many hand traps and disruptions in this deck. In a lot of cases, going second, you are going to find your opponent ending on a very weak board. And you may not necessarily be able to kill them, but you do want to be able to set up disruptions of your own. And so when you side this card out, you're removing the ability to set up that disruption to further stop them from playing on their next turn. So that's why I always choose to keep this card in, even post-sideboard going second. And so far, it's worked out for me. Alright, so now we're going to be moving into the last of the traps and also into the hand traps. So going into this format, I am choosing to play triple Dominus Purge. Previously, I was playing Bestials in the deck, but I think going into this next format, we're going to see a little bit less Fiendsmith in the format, at least at the highest level. And so the Bestials become less powerful in that sense. And I believe Dominus Purge becomes more powerful because now that Malice has more cards that want to search, Purge is a better card against them. It's a powerful card against Mitsurugi, Ryzeal, Blue Eyes, White Forest. There's just a lot that it hits into the format right now, which is why I chose to bring it back into the deck. And then we are, of course, on triple copies of Infinite Impermanence. It's always great if you lead with an Imperm and then Dominus Purge later in the turn, because then your Dominus Purge will also destroy, not just negate. Catching a Malice player on their Red Ransom with a Dominus Purge that also destroys the Red Ransom can just end their turn in a lot of cases. So very powerful combination. Definitely recommend playing both if you have access to them. Then, of course, we are on triple Effect Veiler. The fact that this is searchable off of your Sage with Eyes of Blue, and then also in a pinch can link into your Spirit with Eyes of Blue if needed. Just makes it very versatile, and again, highly searchable, and we want to be able to search it multiple turns in a row, which is why we're on 3 copies. And then because we are on triple Veiler, triple Imperm, I am choosing to play 3 copies of Nibiru. Nibiru is always a powerful card, but when you pair it with 6 targeted negations, it's that much better because you can nib through boards that include Caesar or Ilia Sylvia or other Omni negates on the field. Allied Code, Adagmister, for example, just being able to let your opponent set up their board, think they're safe, and then drop the Nib Veiler or Nib Imperm combo can be game-ending in some cases, which is why I choose to play the 3 Nib. Then we are on triple copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Just always a very powerful hand trap. The only thing I'll say is make sure if you draw both Ash Blossom and Purge, of course remember to use your Ash Blossom first, because once you Purge from hand, you will be locked out of Ash Blossom for the rest of the game. So if you draw both, always use your Ash Blossom first. And then for the last hand trap, we are on Triple Mulcharmy Perulia. If you've watched any of my other recent profiles, you know that I think going into this format, this is the best Mulcharmy to main because of the versatility that it has against what's expected to be the top decks. Just also, again, remember, you can't Perulia after you've purged. I don't know why you would want to do that anyway. Typically, if you draw Perulia going second, you're going to want to activate it in the draw phase. But it is important to remember, in case you get into a simplified game state later, you don't want to accidentally Perulia when you're locked out of using the effect. So that wraps up the main deck. We are on 42 cards total, I believe. And that slightly higher deck count does slightly lower your chances of hard drawing a brick like Blue Eyes White Dragon, so that's why we don't mind being slightly over 40 in a deck like this. Moving on to the extra deck, we are of course going to start with triple Spirit with Eyes of Blue. Very powerful Link 1. I see a lot of people play 2 of its copies in the deck. I don't think that's correct. In a lot of game states, if you're getting hit with hand traps on your first turn, you may end up needing to end on something like a Seal's Pass. So being able to go, Sage with Eyes of Blue into Spirit, and then maybe you get hand traps, you have Mausoleum, you go Maiden into a second Spirit, and now you can go these 2 into your Seals in order to have a disruption set up on your opponent's turn. But then you still want to have a Spirit for later in the game. You don't want to find yourself out of Spirit, since this is one of your best ways to recur Blue Eyes from a graveyard if your True Light is offline. So 3 copies. I've played a lot of games with the deck, and you would be hard-pressed to get me to go down in the number of copies of this card. For the other Link 1, I am playing Relinquished Anima. Because we're playing Nibiru, we're going to find ourselves staring down a very large token in a lot of game states, and rather than having to find a very convoluted out like Moonlight Rose Dragon or something of that nature, Relinquished Anima is just the cleanest way to out a very large token that you put on board, so that's why that's there. And then you heard me mention it, we are playing 1 Heretic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres as our only Link 2 monster. It's just, when you get disrupted and you can't end on a full board, being able to set up spheres plus maybe a hand trap or 2 in hand can be enough to get the game state to come back to you. It's a very powerful card that I think a lot of people underestimate what can come off 1 Seals. Then for the fusion monsters, we do have the 1 Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate and the 1 Tyrant Dragon. This is very standard in the deck. You're equipping your Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate, and then when you get rid of a Blue Eyes, it'll go to grave. You can turn a Blue Eyes equipped with the Neos into Tyrant Dragon by Tyrant Dragon's inherent summoning effect. I don't typically do that play on my first turn. Again, just a little tip, because I want to keep the Tyrant in my extra deck to be able to fuse into it with Roar of a Blue-Eyed Dragon's graveyard effect to banish and fusion summon, because you almost always will have access to 2 dragons. There are situations where you want to go into this to get into the graveyard to then revive off of Ultimate Spirit Dragon, but typically I like to save it and keep it in the extra deck for maybe the turn 2 play or later down the line. Then moving into the Synchros, we do play 2 Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon. This is really only all you need if you're not playing the Crimson Dragon build of the deck, which I am not. Typically you'll go into 1 on your first turn and then 1 on your second turn, and usually the game will be over by that point. If not, you have other options to go into, but I've never found myself sitting there saying, I wish I had a third Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon, so 2 copies it is. And then the targets for that, we are on 2 Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon. I feel like 1 is a little too risky, because again, if you go into that 1 copy off your first Spirit Dragon, you may want to get into another one later down the line in some of those grindy games. So I don't want to find myself with only 1 and not having the Omni Negate to go into as a disruption in those longer games. Then for the targets, we have the 1 Lightstorm Dragon and the 1 Moonlight Rose Dragon. Lightstorm Dragon is a great disruption, being able to pop spell or traps. Minimum 1, but typically you can pop even up to 2 or 3. And then Moonlight Rose is just a option for a non-destruction removal. And going to drop a little bit of knowledge for y'all real quick. This is a great option if your opponent activates talents when you have a Spirit Dragon on board, because if you tag into this monster, it's summoned. Talents resolves. If they take this monster, you as the owner who summoned the card get to activate and resolve the effect still. So even if they talents to take, you can tag into this. They take it, and now you get the choice. You can bounce this back to keep it off their board. You can bounce another card on their board back if they have another target. So just a little tip for y'all there. And then with Lightstorm Dragon, when it is destroyed, typically by Spirit Dragon's effect, the ability to reset any spell or trap can be very powerful. And then for the last target, the brand new Ancient Fairy Life Dragon that you saw at the beginning of the video. This is another target that you can tag into, and the very important thing with this card, it gives you the ability to all of your Ancient Fairy Dragons and cards that mention Ancient Fairy Dragon, which it does in its own text by nature of its effect. It gives them the ability to attack in defense position using their defense points for damage calculation. So you tag into this with your Ultimate Spirit Dragon. It has 3,300 attack, and it can attack with that, with those defense points. Previously, Blue Eyes would have an issue sometimes getting too lethal if your opponent was still at 8,000, specifically because Spirit Dragon has to summon in defense. But now Spirit Dragon alone represents 5,800 damage, because you attack for 2,500, activate the effect, tag into Ancient Fairy Life Dragon, and then attack with it for 3,300. So getting too lethal just became much more easy with the deck. And then for the last card in the extra deck, we do have 1 Star Slayer Typhon Sky Crisis. This is a card that I know a lot of people say is the concede button. I believe if you play this card right, it is the win button more often than it is the concede button. There's been numerous game states where you get to a simplified game state and being able to go into a Typhon to remove a threat off the board, potentially push for lethal, but even just remove maybe your opponent's only monster off the board and put them into top deck mode can win you the game. So I really like this card on the deck. I would not imagine cutting it anytime soon. And that wraps up the deck profile, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, Blue Eyes was my favorite deck to play throughout the entirety of last format. I did a lot of playing with it, entered a lot of tournaments, and this is what I feel like the deck should look like going into Alliance Insight, where I feel like it's still going to be a very powerful contender for the format. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the deck down below. What do you think the best build is? Do you think maybe the Crimson Dragon build has a little bit more merit in this format, or do you think not? Or maybe are you thinking of mixing Blue Eyes with Dragon Rulers? I've heard people talk about that as well. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and keep an eye out for more Alliance Insight profiles coming soon. Thanks, guys.